I had been looking forward to our 10th anniversary for months. Not in the loud, extravagant way some couples celebrate. No weekend getaway to Paris or diamond upgrade I couldn't afford. Just a quiet, meaningful evening. The kind we used to have before life got crowded with promotions, late nights at the office, and the slow drift that turns two people who once couldn't keep their hands off each other into polite roommates. My name is Claire Emerson. I'm 36, a senior graphic designer who works from home most days, and until that night, I still believed that love could be repaired with enough effort from one side. I'd booked the table at La Belle Époque 6 weeks earlier. It's the little French place downtown with the candlelight that makes everyone look softer, the one where David proposed to me exactly 10 years ago. I even called ahead to ask if they still had the corner booth, the one tucked beneath the old black and white photograph of Edith Piaf. They did. I told them it was our anniversary. The hostess sounded genuinely happy for us. I spent the afternoon getting ready the way women do when they want to feel like the version of themselves their partner first fell in love with. A long bath with the lavender oil David once said made my skin smell like summer. The navy dress that hugs my waist and falls just above the knee, the one he used to slide his hand under at parties when he thought no one was looking. I curled my hair loosely, put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 5th anniversary, and dabbed perfume at my wrists and behind my ears. By 6 o'clock, I was ready. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone in hand, waiting for his text. He'd promised he'd leave the office by 5:30. Big deadline, he'd said that morning over coffee, barely looking up from his laptop. But I'll make it. 10 years, Claire. I know. At 6:15, I sent a gentle nudge. On my way soon. Tables at 7. No answer. At 6:40, I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. By 6:50, I was standing in the kitchen in my coat and heels, staring at the anniversary card I'd written him, 3 full pages about how proud I was of the man he'd become, how I still got butterflies when he laughed at my stupid jokes, how I was excited for the next 10 years. At 7 sharp, my phone finally buzzed. David, running late. Client dinner ran over. Might be another hour. So sorry, babe. Order without me? I read it twice. Then a third time. An hour. On our 10th anniversary. After I'd reminded him 4 times that week. Something inside me stilled. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet, crystalline clarity. The kind that comes when you finally see the pattern you've been pretending isn't there. I looked at the card in my hand, at the carefully chosen dress, at the effort I'd poured into a night he clearly hadn't even remembered until I reminded him. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a different number. Mr. Harrington's office, came the crisp voice of his assistant. This is Claire Emerson. David's wife. Is Richard still in the office? A brief pause. He is, actually. They're wrapping up a client dinner in the executive dining room. Could you please tell him that Claire Emerson would like to join him for a drink? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Another pause, this one surprised. Of course, Mrs. Emerson. I'll let him know. I hung up, slipped the anniversary card into my clutch, and ordered an Uber. Richard Harrington is David's boss, the CEO of the firm where David has been gunning for partner for the last 3 years. We've met a handful of times at company events. He's charming in that polished, old money way, silver hair, impeccable suits, a deep voice that makes you feel like whatever you're saying is the most interesting thing he's heard all day. David idolizes him. Talks about him constantly. Richard says, Richard thinks, if I can impress Richard. I'd never called him directly before. But tonight, something shifted. The Uber pulled up outside the gleaming glass tower at 7:20. The security guard recognized me from holiday parties and waved me through. On the executive floor, the assistant greeted me with a curious smile. Mrs. Emerson, Mr. Harrington is expecting you. They're just finishing dessert. She led me past the conference rooms to the private dining area. Through the glass doors, I could see them, 8 men in suits, laughter rolling out, wine glasses raised. David sat near the head of the table, tie loosened, face flushed with whatever story he was telling. He looked relaxed. Happy. Not like a man who was late for his 10th anniversary. Richard spotted me first. He stood immediately, buttoning his jacket. "Claire," he said warmly, crossing the room to kiss my cheek. What a lovely surprise. The table quieted. David turned, and the smile froze on his face. "Claire?" He half stood, confusion flickering. "What are you, did we have plans?" The room went very still. I smiled the way I do when clients ask for the 5th revision. Calm. Professional. Unruffled. "We did," I said lightly. La Belle Époque. 7 o'clock. "But you mentioned a client dinner, so I thought I'd join this one instead." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, but he recovered beautifully. "Of course. Please, take my seat." I was just finishing. He pulled out the chair beside him, the one directly across from David. David's mouth opened, then closed. He looked from me to Richard and back again, panic creeping into his eyes. I sat down gracefully, crossing my legs, and accepted the glass of Sancerre Richard poured for me. "So," I said, looking around the table with a bright smile, "what are we celebrating?" The next 90 minutes were, in a word, exquisite. Richard steered the conversation masterfully, asking about my work, my recent projects, genuinely listening when I spoke. The other men followed his lead. I laughed at their jokes. I asked intelligent questions about the merger they'd been discussing. I told a funny story about a client who'd once asked me to make his logo more millennial. David sat across from me the entire time, barely touching his wine. Every time I met his eyes, he looked away. At one point, Richard turned to him and said, "David tells me you're the creative genius behind his best pitch decks." I had no idea we had such talent in the family. David forced a laugh. "She's incredible." I raised my glass slightly in acknowledgement, but said nothing. When dessert came, some decadent chocolate thing with gold leaf, Richard checked his watch. "Gentlemen, I think we've kept the lovely Claire from her evening long enough. David, why don't you see your wife home?" The group chuckled obligingly. David stood quickly. "Of course." In the elevator down, he finally spoke. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I completely lost track of time." The client. I held up a hand. "We'll talk at home." The ride back was silent. When we walked into our apartment, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of water. David hovered in the doorway. "I messed up," he said quietly. "I know. I don't even have an excuse. I just got caught up." I turned to face him. "You didn't get caught up, David. You forgot. Completely. Until you saw me sitting across from your boss, the man whose approval you've been chasing for 3 years, looking like the wife you stood up on our 10th anniversary." He flinched. "I've been reminding you for weeks," I continued, voice steady. "I planned everything. I got dressed up. I waited. And you sent a text saying to order without you. Like it was just another Tuesday." His shoulders slumped. "I don't know how to fix this." I looked at him for a long moment, the man I'd loved since I was 26, the one who used to leave me notes in my lunch when we were broke newlyweds, who once drove through a blizzard to bring me soup when I was sick. "You can start," I said, "by understanding what tonight really cost you." He nodded, eyes wet. "I thought impressing Richard was the most important thing in my life," he whispered. "But sitting there, watching him talk to you, realizing you'd rather spend our anniversary with my boss than wait for me alone. I've never felt so small." I didn't comfort him. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the bedroom and pulled out the anniversary card I'd written. I handed it to him without a word. He read it in silence. When he reached the last page, his hands were shaking. "I don't deserve this," he said. "No," I agreed. "You don't. Not tonight." He looked up, stricken. "Are you leaving?" I considered the question. No. But something has to change, David. Because I refuse to spend the next 10 years being the wife who waits. He nodded slowly. Starting tomorrow, he said, I'm blocking my calendar for every anniversary, every birthday, every random Tuesday you want. No exceptions. And I'm telling Richard the First need better work-life balance if I'm going to make partner. Because I'd rather stay senior VP forever than lose you. I studied his face. For the first time in years, I saw the man I married looking back at me. We'll see, I said finally. But I let him hold me that night. And when he woke me the next morning with coffee and an apology that lasted through breakfast, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, our 11th year might be better than the 10th. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't leaving. It's making him realize exactly what he almost lost, by showing him you're perfectly capable of having a wonderful evening without him. I didn't notice the shift all at once. That's the thing about slow erosion, you don't see the cliff edge until you're already teetering on it. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment David and I stopped being partners and started playing very different roles in the same story. But at the time, it felt like nothing more than the natural progression of a successful marriage. We met 12 years ago, when we were both 24 and thought we knew everything about life. I was fresh out of design school, freelancing out of coffee shops, and he was a junior analyst at a mid-tier consulting firm, burning with ambition. Our first date was supposed to be drinks after work, but it turned into dinner, then a walk along the river, then breakfast the next morning because neither of us wanted the night to end. David was magnetic back then. He listened like what I said actually mattered. When I talked about my dream of one day having my own studio, he didn't just nod, he asked questions. What kind of clients did I want? What would the office look like? He remembered details I'd mentioned weeks earlier and brought them up in conversation like they were important because they were important to me. He used to text me from meetings. Thinking about you in that red sweater. Can't concentrate. Or leave post-it notes on my laptop when he left for work before I woke up. You're going to kill that presentation today. I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. When he got his first big promotion, senior analyst, a 40% raise, he didn't celebrate with his colleagues. He came straight home, picked me up, spun me around our tiny apartment, and said, "This is for us, Claire. Everything I do is for us." I believed him. The early years were a beautiful balancing act. I supported him through 80-hour weeks and MBA classes on weekends. He supported me when I quit freelancing to launch my own small design agency, even though it meant lean months and maxed out credit cards. We were a team. When one of us stumbled, the other was there to steady. I remember the night I landed my first major corporate client. I was shaking as I hung up the phone. David was on a work trip in Chicago, but I called him anyway. He answered on the first ring, even though it was midnight there. "Tell me everything," he said, voice thick with sleep and pride. When I finished, there was silence. Then, "Claire Emerson, you are unstoppable. I'm so fucking proud of you." He flew home the next day, cutting his trip short, just to take me out to celebrate. That was the David I married. The one who looked at me like I was the best part of his story. The change started around year 5. It was subtle, like the way a photograph fades if you leave it in the sun too long. David made manager. Then director. Then vice president by 31, an almost unheard of trajectory at his firm. Each promotion came with more money, more responsibility, more prestige. And more distance. At first, I was thrilled for him. I threw promotion parties, updated his LinkedIn with glowing recommendations, practiced his speeches in our living room. When people asked what my husband did, I'd say, "He's going to be running that company one day," and I meant it as a compliment to both of us. But slowly, the language shifted. When we'd go to company events, I started hearing, "This is David's wife, Claire. She does graphic design, right?" I'd smile and clarify that I owned a boutique agency with 12 employees and a waiting list of clients. Most people would nod politely, then turn back to David to ask about the latest merger. David never corrected them. Not once. I told myself it didn't matter. He was under so much pressure. Of course, conversations revolved around work when we were at work events. But then it started happening at our friends' dinners. At birthday parties. Even at my own family gatherings. "David, how's the big job going?" my dad would ask. And David would launch into 20-minute monologues about office politics and revenue projections while I sat beside him, smiling like a good wife should. No one ever asked me about my agency anymore. Not even David. I remember the first time it really stung. We were at a friend's wedding, another couple from his office, of course. During the reception, a senior partner pulled David aside for nearly an hour. When he finally came back, flushed with excitement, he said, "Richard thinks I'm on the short list for partner. Can you believe it?" I was genuinely happy for him. "That's amazing, babe." He kissed my forehead absently. "Yeah. Gotta keep killing it." Later that night, in our hotel room, I tried to tell him about the new contract I'd just signed, one that would finally put my agency in the black after years of grinding. He was scrolling through emails on his phone. "That's great, honey," he said without looking up. "Hey, do you think I should wear the navy or the charcoal suit to the strategy offsite next week?" Richard always wears navy. I stared at him for a long moment. "Navy," I said finally. "It brings out your eyes." He smiled, still reading his screen. "Thanks, babe. You always know." That was the first night I cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear. The admiration had turned into assumption. My role had become David's supportive wife. My accomplishments were nice, but his were vital. My time was flexible, his was precious. My dreams were hobbies, his were the real future. The emotional distance didn't come with fights. That would have been easier. Fights require engagement. Passion. This was quieter. More deadly. We stopped having arguments because we stopped having conversations that mattered. He'd come home late, 9, 10, 11, and I'd have dinner waiting. He'd eat standing at the counter, talking about his day. I learned to nod in all the right places, to ask the questions that kept him going. What did Richard say? How do you think the board will vote? My own day, client disasters, creative breakthroughs, the thrill of seeing my designs in national campaigns, shrank to a sentence or two. How was your day? He'd sometimes remember to ask. Busy, I'd say. Good, though. Cool, he'd reply, already checking his phone again. We still had sex. Still said, "I love you." Still functioned as a couple. But the intimacy, the real kind, where you let someone see the messy parts, was gone. I became the perfect corporate wife. I knew which partners' wives liked white wine and which preferred red. I remembered birthdays and sent thoughtful gifts on his behalf. I dressed the part, laughed at the right jokes, made sure no one could ever say David Emerson's wife was anything less than an asset. And in return, I got to stand in his shadow. There were moments, brief, sharp ones, where I'd catch a glimpse of how far we drifted. Like the night I won Designer of the Year from the local creative guild. It was a big deal, black tie event, my whole team there, my parents flew in. David had promised to be there. At 7:30, when the ceremony was starting, he texted. Stuck in traffic. So sorry. You're going to crush it. I smiled for photos, gave my acceptance speech with tears in my eyes, thanked my incredible husband who's probably watching this from the back row right now, while knowing he was actually in a client dinner across town. He sent flowers the next day. Gorgeous ones. With a card. So proud of you, babe. Sorry I missed it. I put them on the kitchen counter and stared at them for a long time. Another time, my agency hit a major milestone, our first $1 million year. I wanted to celebrate, just us. Made reservations at the rooftop place he loved, wore the dress he'd bought me for Christmas. He came home at midnight. Completely forgot, he said, looking stricken for exactly 3 seconds before exhaustion took over. Big presentation tomorrow. Can we rain check? We never did. I stopped telling him about my successes because it hurt too much when they didn't matter to him. Stopped sharing my fears because he'd try to fix them with solutions instead of just listening. Stopped reaching for him in bed when he was checking emails under the covers. The worst part? He didn't even notice. To him, everything was fine. We had a beautiful home, money in the bank, vacations twice a year. I was still there when he came home, still beautiful, still supportive. What more could a man want? He'd become exactly what he'd always admired, the powerful executive with the perfect life. And I'd become the backdrop that made his story possible. The emotional neglect wasn't loud. It was in the spaces where things used to be. Where once there were long Sunday mornings in bed talking about everything and nothing, now there were separate laptops and separate silences. Where once he'd ask about my dreams, now he assumed I didn't have any that mattered as much as his. Where once we'd been each other's biggest cheerleaders, now I was just there. I didn't hate him for it. That would have required energy I no longer had. I just felt hollow. And then came our 10th anniversary, the one where I finally stopped waiting. But that's another part of the story. The truth is, the marriage didn't break on that night. It had been cracking, slowly and steadily, for years. Each promotion, each missed moment, each assumption that I'd always be there, always understanding, always putting him first. I'd spent a decade shrinking myself to fit the space he left for me. Until I finally decided I was done living in the margins of someone else's success story. While David climbed the corporate ladder in plain sight, I was building something quieter, stronger, and entirely my own. My agency started as a one-woman operation in our spare bedroom. By our 5th anniversary, it had 5 employees. By the 8th, we'd moved into a loft downtown with exposed brick and natural light, my dream space. Today, Emerson's studio employs 22 people, serves Fortune 500 clients, and has been featured in design journals David never reads. I did it without fanfare. No victory laps, no demands for congratulations at his company dinners. When awards came, Designer of the Year, Women in Business Honors, I attended alone or with my team, smiling for photos he'd see weeks later on my Instagram and like with a simple heart emoji. I learned early that my growth didn't register on his radar unless it directly benefited him, a pitch deck for his presentation, a favor called in with a client. So I stopped sharing. Not out of bitterness, at first, just efficiency. Why spend energy explaining wins to someone who'd respond with, "That's great, babe," while typing an email? Silence became my protection. I negotiated bigger contracts in the mornings, mentored young designers over lunch, spoke on panels about creative leadership in the afternoons, all while he assumed I was working from home. The truth was, I was out in the world, earning respect he never witnessed. There's a particular loneliness in being underestimated by the person who once knew you best. Nights when I'd come home buzzing from a breakthrough, only to find him asleep with his phone on his chest. Mornings when I'd dress for a major client pitch and he'd kiss my cheek without looking up from the financial news. The slow realization that the woman he married, the ambitious, sparkling one, had been filed away in his mind as supportive wife, static and unchanging. But I kept evolving. I learned to find validation in the eyes of my team when a campaign launched perfectly, in the quiet pride of bank statements that showed what I'd built from nothing, in the mirror where I saw a woman who no longer needed applause from the one seat that stayed empty. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I was simply becoming impossible to ignore. I sit on boards no one in David's world has heard of, advisory councils for tech startups, selection committees for major design awards, mentorship circles where CEOs seek my opinion on branding worth millions. I walk into private dinners with founders and investors who greet me by first name, pull out my chair, hang on my quiet suggestions. My influence is whispered recommendations that shift budgets, quiet vetoes that kill bad ideas, introductions that launch careers. At home, I'm still David's wife who works from home. The irony is delicious. The woman he barely notices shapes decisions in rooms he'd kill to enter. 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, Richard's email arrived, simple, direct. "Claire, I'd value your perspective on our rebranding. Would you join me for a private dinner next Thursday? No shop talk with the team, just your honest thoughts. 7 p.m. at Le Petit. No flattery. No agenda beyond professional respect. I read it twice. David was in the next room, oblivious. This wasn't flirtation, it was recognition, from the one person whose opinion David chased. I waited 2 days before replying. I'd be honored. Thursday works. Deliberate. Restrained. A quiet yes to being seen for my expertise, not my role as wife. The balance was shifting. David sat at the long mahogany table, wine glass in hand, laughing at Richard's story about the Tokyo deal. The client dinner had stretched past 9, phones buzzed with follow-ups, but no one moved to leave. Another hour, he thought, just long enough to seal the impression. His phone vibrated. Claire, tables at 7. On my way soon. He glanced, smiled absently, and typed, running late. Client dinner ran over. Might be another hour. So sorry, babe. Order without me? He hit send without hesitation. Work was momentum, anniversaries could wait. Across town, Claire read the message, set her phone down, and chose a different table. That casual dismissal, polite, thoughtless, final, became the moment David unknowingly chose ambition over the woman who had always chosen him. No argument. No guilt on his part. Only her quiet clarity. David sat at the long mahogany table, wine glass in hand, laughing at Richard's story about the Tokyo deal. The client dinner had stretched past 9, phones buzzed with follow-ups, but no one moved to leave. Another hour, he thought, just long enough to seal the impression. His phone vibrated. Claire, tables at 7. On my way soon. He glanced, smiled absently, and typed, running late. Client dinner ran over. Might be another hour. So sorry, babe. Order without me? He hit send without hesitation. Work was momentum, anniversaries could wait. Across town, Claire read the message, set her phone down, and chose a different table. That casual dismissal, polite, thoughtless, final, became the moment David unknowingly chose ambition over the woman who had always chosen him. No argument. No guilt on his part. Only her quiet clarity. The executive dining room glowed softly, crystal glasses catching candlelight, silverware whispering against porcelain. Richard Harrington presided at the head, commanding without effort. Claire sat opposite David, posture perfect, smile serene. Conversation flowed effortlessly, market trends, creative strategy, the firm's upcoming rebrand. When Richard turned to her, Claire, your take on authentic branding? She answered with quiet precision, insights sharp enough to still the table. Eyes shifted. Nods of genuine respect. David's fork paused midair. No one mentioned anniversaries. No explanations offered. In the elegant hush, power revealed itself subtly. The wife they'd overlooked now shaped the room's attention. David watched, silent, realizing too late who had always held the stronger hand. He stands in the quiet aftermath, folders aligned, voice steady, suit immaculate. Only now does he see it, the pattern he dismissed, the intelligence he underestimated. Recognition replaces arrogance with a sickening clarity. Every decision she made was deliberate. Every silence, strategic. Panic rises, sharp and unwelcome, but he buries it beneath practiced professionalism. He adjusts his posture, signs the document, pretends control remains his. Yet power has already shifted. No argument announced it. No confrontation marked it. It happened in understanding, too late. As he exhales, he knows the truth. The moment everything clicked was the moment he lost. The consequences arrive quietly, without spectacle. His career doesn't collapse, it narrows. Opportunities pass him by with polite smiles and unread emails. Meetings end sooner. Decisions are made elsewhere. He can't protest, nothing unjust has occurred. The wife never raises her voice, never claims victory. Her influence moves calmly, precisely, guided by fairness rather than revenge. She corrects records, enforces standards, lets truth stand on its own. What he loses is not taken from him, it's simply no longer offered. In underestimating her, he misjudged the balance of power. And the cost is permanence, not drama. The conversation never happens, and that is the point. No accusations are spoken, no defense is prepared. What remains unsaid carries more weight than any argument ever could. Silence fills the space where ego once demanded resolution. She no longer needs to explain herself, he no longer knows how to ask. Emotional maturity chooses restraint over victory, clarity over noise. There is nothing left to prove, only truths already understood. Acceptance arrives without apology, without closure, without reconciliation. They move forward separately, bound only by what was learned. In the absence of words, the message is unmistakable. Some endings speak loudest when left untouched. She reflects quietly, not with regret, but with clarity. The journey reshaped her, teaching her that worth was never granted by marriage, it existed long before it. She sees now how often she dimmed herself, mistaking patience for loyalty. Choosing dignity over drama became her turning point. She no longer seeks validation through being understood by someone unwilling to truly see her. Letting go is not loss, it is release. Her value does not need recognition to remain real. As she moves forward, she carries nothing to prove, only a deeper respect for herself and the strength it took to choose differently. The aftermath settles in slowly, reshaping what remains. The marriage no longer moves on assumptions, power is no longer automatic or unspoken. Where entitlement once lived, caution now exists. Respect replaces familiarity, not through affection but awareness. Conversations are measured, emotions guarded. The dynamic shifts without announcement, two people occupying the same space with different footing. Whether it becomes emotional distance or a quiet separation depends on the silence they accept. There is no hostility, only restraint. What once felt permanent now feels provisional. In this new balance, nothing is demanded. Everything is chosen. And that choice changes everything, even when nothing is said aloud. The final realization arrives without triumph. Real power is not dominance or revenge, it is restraint, clarity, and self-command. She understands now that cruelty is unnecessary when truth stands on its own. Growth does not announce itself, it simply changes what she will tolerate. There are no speeches, no final confrontations, no need to be understood. Closure comes quietly, without explanation, because it is internal, not negotiated. What ends does so cleanly, without bitterness. What remains is strength, steady and unprovable. In choosing peace over spectacle, she steps forward unburdened, no longer reacting, only becoming. The final realization arrives without triumph. Real power is not dominance or revenge, it is restraint, clarity, and self-command. She understands now that cruelty is unnecessary when truth stands on its own. Growth does not announce itself, it simply changes what she will tolerate. There are no speeches, no final confrontations, no need to be understood. Closure comes quietly, without explanation, because it is internal, not negotiated. What ends does so cleanly, without bitterness. What remains is strength, steady and unprovable. In choosing peace over spectacle, she steps forward unburdened, no longer reacting, only becoming. This story ends with a quiet moral. Neglect is rarely loud, but its damage is lasting. Ego convinces people that presence is optional, that love will survive on assumption alone. It won't. Partnership demands attention, humility, and consistent respect. Silence, often mistaken for weakness, can be strength when it protects dignity and clarity. Not every lesson needs confrontation to be learned. And underestimating someone, especially the one who stands beside you, is the most expensive mistake of all. Because when patience runs out, it doesn't shout. It withdraws. And by the time its absence is felt, the cost is already permanent.